Well, I realize it has been a little time since I've been able to have a homily here at the 4:30, but I'm sure you know that I like to keep you moving, so we're beginning with a question, because I like to ask questions. It's not a trick. Some of my questions people think are tricks. They're correct, they are. But this one is not. And the question is this: how many of you have ever felt treated in an inconsistent way? Meaning, as you compare yourself to a peer, you were treated one way and they were treated a different way, and you were not treated as well as them. How many of you have ever felt treated in an inconsistent way? Perhaps if you are a young person, or for those of us who are a little older, when we were young people, maybe we felt that, one of our brothers or sisters always got to do what they wanted to do, and we couldn't do the same thing. Or maybe we got in trouble for something, and when they did the same thing, they didn't get in trouble. Maybe we're in school, and it seems that there's one student that gets away with everything in the classroom while the rest are held accountable over and over again. Perhaps a coach has a favorite player who, even if they don't show up to practice, they still get to play, but the rest have to follow the rule. Or maybe at work, there's probably that one person that, even though they never seem to get their vacation request in on time, it's still granted, where we got to follow the rule. Everybody with me on that? We've probably all experienced that in some way, shape, or form. Some type of inconsistent behavior and treatment. Well, what happens to you when you're treated inconsistently? What happens to you? Because what happens to me is I get frustrated, first of all. Secondly, the frustration sometimes turns into anger, can get angry when I am treated in an inconsistent way, and that can lead to apathy after a while. After all, nothing's ever going to change anyway, so why should I try anymore? And sometimes that frustration, anger, and apathy can lead to eventually treating others in an inconsistent way. We almost imitate that behavior to other people. Inconsistent behavior. I want you to think about our world for a moment. Seems that sometimes in the news, if it's local, national, international, some event takes place, usually a tragic event, can take place, and it really calls us all to stop. There's a plane crash. We all stop. We focus on it on the news. It makes us think. Also, the plane can go missing, as we saw the Malaysian airliner. Captivated the news for some time, still never found. We stop. We think about these things. A shooting can take place in a school or in another public area, and we stop and we wonder, why does this continue to happen? Perhaps more locally, perhaps someone could be killed by a drunk driver, and we stop and we wonder, why did this happen? And sometimes when these events are more local in nature, that there's some geographic area, we almost establish a shrine, something new that's begun. First time I remember seeing it was when Princess Diana died. We almost create these shrines. We go to the spot, and mountains upon mountains of flowers are there. People come and place them, or teddy bears I see often, or candles burning. We almost create a little shrine because we want to share and allow those who suffer directly to know that we're sharing in their sorrow. Simple question this evening: who stops when an unborn child loses their life to abortion? Who stops for that child? And where is their shrine? Who is establishing their shrine of flowers or teddy bears or candles? On June the 10th of this year, President Obama in the news made some very good observations and raised some questions for us as an American people to reflect upon. That observation came on June the 10th because it was the date of the 117th shooting in a school that academic year. It's the day of the shooting in Oregon. And our president told us as a nation that we, quote, should do some soul searching over this epidemic of gun violence in our schools. He also went on to say that we should, quote, be ashamed that we have not addressed this problem. He basically, through his statements, raised a question that he wanted us as Americans to ponder as to why these things are taking place and what it is we can do to stop them. Well, this evening I want to give you my answer to that question. I've had a few months to think about it. And if you know anything about me at all, you know my answers are never short and to the point, so it's going to be a couple thoughts to share with you. The first thought is this: we are a selfie culture. I have my iPhone to take my selfie picture. Perfectly named product, iPhone. Perfectly named photograph, selfie. Why? Because more and more we think of ourselves. And less, day in and day out, in ordinary events, do we place ourselves in the shoes of other people. We become so focused and maybe overwhelmed at times with our own work and concerns that we really fail to see the needs of others in our very midst. We're a selfie culture. I fear, number two, I fear that we have lost our conviction. I fear that we've lost our conviction. We live in a tolerant society. Over and over again, we're called to be more and more tolerant. And we're called to be tolerant of things that were once considered to be morally evil. And now we must tolerate them. And at the time that we're increasing the amount of tolerance, we are decreasing the acceptance of a universal truth of what is morally right and morally wrong. G.K. Chesterton, a great philosopher, theologian, poet, a writer, in England in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, had a quote on this. Chesterton once wrote, "Tolerance is the virtue of those who have lost their conviction." Tolerance is the virtue of those who have lost their conviction. Perhaps we've lost some of our conviction. Number three, we desire to inform people of what we think and want, but less and less do we want to discuss with people any particular thought. The greatest invention, text messaging. I can text you anything that I want to tell you, press that little green send, and turn my phone off and never listen to what your thoughts are in reply. More and more we want to just convey information and often not listen and enter into dialogue. Any good question is answered with another question, and so number 4 is a question. Do we walk in virtue? Do we walk in virtue? To walk in virtue leads us to be a virtuous person, a person who is filled with virtue. Or do we walk in vice? To walk in vice leads us to be a vicious person, a person who is filled with vice. We cannot walk in both virtue and vice at the same time. It's inconsistent. We can't do that. Either we're walking in the path of virtue or we're walking in the path of vice. Basically, the answer is that we are inconsistent. A teenager in Williamsville commits suicide because he's bullied. This is not an isolated issue. It's connected to many other issues. Shooting takes place in a school, 117 of them last academic year. A shooting takes place in a school. This is not an isolated issue. It's connected to other issues. Backpacks with bombs are left at a marathon. This is not an isolated issue. It's connected to other issues. An unborn child bullied in the womb to the point of death. It's not an isolated issue. It's connected to other issues. And now more and more in healthcare in our country, the question is raised for our elderly and those who are seriously ill, are we going to be willing to spend the money that it takes to keep you alive and healthy and heal you? This is not an isolated issue. It is connected to many other issues. I find it odd that in our country, federal law, the federal law of the United States of America, federal law protects the fertilized egg of a bald eagle, and federal law protects the fertilized egg of a golden eagle, but the federal law of the United States does not protect the fertilized egg of a human being. I don't know about you, but I consider that rather inconsistent. The answer to our president's question, I believe, is rather simple. We will not end the violence in our schools till we end the violence in the womb. We will not end the bullying going on in our culture until we end the bullying that goes on in the womb. Simply stated, we need to be consistent. Either we are a culture of life or we are a culture of death. Either the decisions of our lives act in a respect for human life and move us in that direction, or they do not. You cannot be moving in two directions at the same time. It is either the culture of life or the culture of death. We have an inconsistent culture, and inconsistency creates frustration, anger, apathy, a feeling, well, there's nothing I can do about this anyways. I don't know about you, but I deal with a lot of people on a weekly basis. And in the many people that I deal with on a weekly basis, I meet many people weekly who are frustrated. And I meet many people who are angry. And I meet many people who are filled with apathy. Frustration, anger, apathy leads to further inconsistent behavior. So this evening, I'm here not to tell you about how big our problems are. I think you already know that. And if you don't know that, watch the evening news. They'll bring you up to date. I am, however, here this evening to ask you to join me in telling our problems how big our God is. I am here to ask you to join me in telling our culture how the consistent truth of God is bigger than the problems we have facing our world today. And I'm here to ask you tonight and through the week to really consider if you are consistent or inconsistent in your own understanding and efforts of human life. If it be the issue of bullying, drugs and alcohol, school shootings, violence, abortion, capital punishment, euthanasia, the list can go on and on and on. Are you an individual dedicated to moving towards the culture of life, or is there an inconsistency moving towards the culture of death? And as your pastor, I'm inviting you to stand with me in the culture of life. I'm particularly asking you as your pastor to stand with me 1 month from now, on Sunday, October the 5th. I'm asking you to go to Life Chain with me, an annual national event that takes place here in the Diocese of Buffalo and throughout our country. For us in Buffalo, it's on Niagara Falls Boulevard, to stand for 1 hour, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, to stand for 1 hour with me and our brothers and sisters from all of the parishes of the diocese, to stand for the culture of life. If you believe that we need to stand for the culture of life. I invite you to stand with me that day. If you can't stand, bring a lawn chair. I'll personally carry it and set it up for you and bring it back. So don't let that stop you. But I invite you to stand with me that day. There's more information in the bulletin on page 5 about life change. Can you begin to imagine the influence we could have in Western New York if the 15,000 parishioners of this great parish stood together on Niagara Falls Boulevard along with our brothers and sisters from other parishes, the impact that that could have in standing for the truth of the culture of life. Today, I suppose I'm simply asking you to consider your own level of consistency. And I guess I'm asking you the same question that Jesus asked his followers. And that night in the Garden of Gethsemane, are you willing to be with me for 1 hour, to watch, to wait, and to pray?